It's a case which raises serious questions as to whether the UK's immigration service is capable, frankly, of preventing dangerous, violent criminals from entering Britain. An Afghan asylum seeker has been found guilty of murdering an aspiring Marine in Bournemouth last year. Lawangin Abdulrahimzai posed as a child to enter the UK, despite having been convicted, get this, of a double murder in Serbia and being denied asylum in Norway. He was also convicted as well of drug dealing in Italy, reportedly. He was convicted for the fatal stabbing of 21-year-old Thomas Roberts in Bournemouth following an argument over an e-scooter. Now, the Tory MP Lee Anderson, who sits on the Home Affairs Committee, is calling for tougher action, as indeed a lot of you are as well. I want to get to the heart of this story. We're going to be returning to it every single hour that I'm on air and throughout the hour as well. Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I want to know how many adults posing as children are in UK schools. I also want to know how on earth this guy was allowed in, and frankly, loads more questions as well, namely based as well around why can't we do more to age verify people coming across here. GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White joins me now. Mark, the breaking news to start.
Yeah, I mean, this is an absolute shocker of a case, and it highlights something we've been reporting on for many months now, the real concerns about the vetting process for those coming across. How do you know when people throw away their documentation and lie about what the real names and dates of birth are, who they are, and the potential threat they pose? Couple that with the other scam that's going on, which is many people who are adults being told to say that they're teenagers because they are treated differently within the asylum system. We know that they've been both going on in tandem. So this case is really a stark illustration of that. And following this murder, now we have Lee Anderson, who is on the Home Affairs Select Committee, a senior backbencher, now saying it's time to actually detain all asylum seekers until we can do proper checks to establish who exactly they are and the potential threat that they pose. This is what he said, first of all.
I've been saying from day one, anybody arriving here illegally on our shores, because we can't do the full background checks, they should be detained until we can fully decide who they are, where they've come from, and if they've got a legitimate asylum claim. If not, keep them detained in detention centres. That's not too difficult to do.
OK, so, first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, everyone watching or listening, I want your views on that. Do you think, as Lee Anderson has suggested there, that there should be mandatory detention until, frankly, we can figure out who a lot of these people are? But the details of this case, Mark White, are absolutely staggering. The catalogue of unbelievable offences and the fact that this guy ended up in a school full of kids in this country. Yeah,
Abdulrahimzai came to the UK in 2019, crossed the Channel by ferry, claimed asylum at this end, said he was 14 years old, and then dragged out, along with his lawyers, according to authorities, for a number of years, the proper vetting checks to try to determine what age he was. They've now determined that he's now 21. He would have been 18, actually, when he crossed. And, of course, by claiming he was 14, he's given completely different treatment. He's put in the care of a foster family who, incidentally, have said that they were very concerned about his behaviour, the fact that he was constantly stealing knives from the foster mother to go out into the streets of Bournemouth and around Dorset carrying this knife, feeling that he was properly entitled to do that. Well, it's now, of course, emerged that when this young man came across, before he came across, about a year before, he was involved allegedly in the murder of two Afghans in Serbia in what was believed to be a dispute over people smuggling. He, we're told, had an AK-47, shot them at close range. He was convicted in his absence by the Serbian government, also convicted of drug offences in Norway and denied asylum in that country. You were seeing also some indications he was convicted of further drug offences in Italy. And for the Home Office here, there's a nightmare scenario of not really being able to get a handle on who he was and check all this, because there's no sort of joined-up database with Serbia. But in reality, he was giving a completely different name to the name he had in Serbia anyway, and a completely different date of birth. This is the point,
isn't it? This really is the point when people go, we don't know who some of these people are and exactly where they come from or exactly what their state of mind is or exactly what they're capable of. It's stuff like this that makes that justified to say.
There's no doubt. And authorities have told me that out of the, 45, almost 46,000 who came last year, there is no doubt there are hundreds of people who have criminal records who are not really conducive to the public good in this particular country, who you would never want to allow into your nation and be a potential threat to the UK. But the difficulty is, if, as we've discussed, you can't really get a handle on who they are because they're giving false information and they're being schooled by the people traffickers. And then, of course, once they get into the hands of the sort of immigration lawyers, they are there. I'm not saying that the immigration lawyers are telling them to do anything illegal, but they're certainly coaching them on the best, most effective way to ensure that their asylum process and their asylum decision is favourable at the end of the day.
One of the things I'm going to come on to a bit later in the show is how on earth this particular individual, who was posing as a 14-year-old, was allowed to attend school, obviously with people who are genuinely 14 years old. A lot of reports coming out about some of the things that may or may not have happened whilst he was at that school as well. Sickening stuff. We'll come on to that. But the age checks are a big thing for me, Mark. Why can't we do mandatory age checks for people? Is it difficult?
There's a lot of opposition, and it's coming from human rights groups and lawyers who say that this is invasive, as far as children are concerned. It infringes on their human rights. But this morning, as well as Lee Anderson now saying that he wants people detained until we can ascertain exactly who they are and the threat that they pose. The Policing Minister, Chris Philp, speaking in LBC today, has said that this case with Abdul Rahimzai absolutely illustrates why we need to be more innovative and carry out what some may say are invasive checks, but really it's x-raying wrists and other procedures that are not painful, but yes, they are medical checks to try to determine whether the body of an individual is the body of a 14, 15, 16-year-old or the body of a 19, 20, 21-year-old. And that's what Chris Philp says we need to do. And he said that the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, is going to go ahead with proposals in the very near future to ensure that those checks are carried out to stop people who are coming over here claiming to be children and then just disappearing.
Well, and then just disappearing. And it's on that note as well. I understand the Home Office is investigating claims, Mark, just moving this story on slightly. It gets worse, ladies and gentlemen, if you are glued to this at home or listening on your car radios, whatever you're doing. There's claims that asylum-seeking children are being kidnapped from hotels. What's the detail on this?
Well, I have to say that the feedback I'm getting from sources is that they're pretty sceptical and dubious about this line that they're being kidnapped. Yes, people who are on the face of it being considered as child asylum seekers are disappearing from hotels around the country in the hundreds. But there is a suspicion from the authorities that actually many of these children are not children at all, and they fall into the category of Abdul Rahimzai, who say that they're actually children when they're adults, and they're not disappearing because they're being kidnapped, but they're being met in pre-arranged meetings with people who are facilitating their journey away from those hotels to do whatever they do, to meet up with friends or family, work in the illegal economy, go into criminality, whatever it might be. But I'd be very careful about buying into the line that people are coming in just kidnapping these children. That's not what I'm being told is what the authorities suspect.